This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and it's a smackdown between two slim gaming laptops. And I myself was in a bit of a canoodle trying to decide between these two. There are going to be more also that we're going to smack down in the future with these two. But right now, it's the MSI GS65 Stealth Thin versus the Gigabyte Aero 15X. Gigabyte kind of started this whole, it looks kind of classy, but it's really thin and it's really light and it's a gaming laptop kind of thing. Now everybody's getting in on. MSI said, hey, we want a piece of that market share. ASUS has been making the Rogue Zephyrus, which the first generation, you know, was a little bit weird, but now the new Zephyrus 501M series, that one's a little bit more normal looking. We will be reviewing that and comparing it with these in the future as well. I'll give you a few thoughts on that in the interim though. And then there's the 15-inch Razer Blade that we're going to be reviewing as well, which is a whole different level of chic looking. It's the black MacBook in a lot of ways. But anyway, between these two, which were the first two to hit the market of this generation, with long battery life. Let's talk about battery life first, because that's something that we just never saw in thin and light gaming laptops. Usually they got there by cutting the battery in half, basically. So here, no, you get ample batteries. Now, you've got a somewhat larger battery, about a 10 watt-hour larger battery in the Gigabyte, and you have a little bit longer battery life as a result, but they're both very large capacity batteries. They're both using NVIDIA Optimus. We have switchable graphics in here, so when you're doing more lightweight productivity tasks, they'll use Intel HD 630 integrated graphics. So battery life between them with the Gigabyte, it's about 8 hours, unless it gets flaky. We'll talk about that later too. And with the MSI, it's at about 7 hours, which is actually wildly good. Now, this is productivity work, streaming video, a little light Photoshop work. I don't mean when you're gaming, because gaming kills battery life. Now that we have that out of the way, how about build quality? I know, particularly with the MSI GS65 Stealth Thin, some of you have been like, it's tinny, it's thin, it flexes. Yes, they get to be the lightest among all of these, 4.1 pounds. It's about a half a pound lighter than the Gigabyte Aero 15X, which is already very light itself, by using very thin aluminum panels on it. So there is some flex if you squeeze it hard. I myself don't go around squeezing laptops really hard. You know, that's not how I get my jollies. But on the right wrist rest area, if you rest really hard, which again, I don't do, but I've been squeezing and pushing because some of you worry about it, you can hear some creaking. It's probably the plastic clips that retain the bottom. You know, you could probably put in some shims or something if it bothers you. It doesn't bother me. I would call the way the MSI GS65 looks to be faux boutique. It's not going to convince you into thinking it's an XPS 15 or a Razer Blade or a MacBook Pro or something like that, but it looks pretty darn good. The Gigabyte, to me, still has a better build quality in terms of the way the panels go together, in terms of the industrial design being a little more complex and interesting, though maybe not as current in terms of stylish looking. I don't think it is as current. Anyway, the materials on it, both of these are encased in metal, and it's kind of a sandblasted, you know, powder-coated finish, so it's not shiny kind of stuff. The Gigabyte gets the build quality win here. In terms of performance, both of these are available with your choice of a GTX 1060 NVIDIA dedicated graphics card or a 1070 Max-Q. They both come with the same 45-watt Intel Core i7-8750H CPU. So performance, as you might guess, and you can see some benchmark comparisons, is very similar between these two. You're not really going to get an appreciably faster laptop if you go with the same specs than these. Now, when it comes to RAM, both of these have 2 RAM slots, so that's really cool. So up to 32 gigs of DDR4, 2400 megahertz RAM. By default, the Gigabyte comes with one 16 gigabyte module, so that is single channel, which doesn't matter most of the time. There are a few games that still benefit from dual channel. Usually that helps the integrated graphics more than dedicated graphics. Anyway, you can throw in another module and go to 32 gigs without having to throw anything away. The MSI typically comes with 2 RAMs in its slot. So if you get the 16 gig, you get 2 8s. If you get the 32 gig, you'll get 2 16s. The one drawback here, though, is how you upgrade it. We're going to talk about that too. So for solid state storage, SSDs, they're the same. They both have 2 M.2 slots compatible with PCIe NVMe SSDs. That's the faster kind. They come with the faster kind of drive. Both of these, typical configuration is a 512 gig drive. The only exception is if you get the MSI GS65 Best Buy model, which is cheaper than average because they went with a SATA 3 drive. So keep that in mind. So performance about the same, heat not about the same though. MSI is really very good at cooling. They've been doing laptops, many lines of laptops for longer than Gigabyte, to be honest. And they do clever things like not all the heat pipes are shared. So that means the GPU isn't necessarily heating up the CPU as much when it's active. More cooling pipes. It's 3 fans versus 2 on the Gigabyte. All this comes together to mean that it does run cooler in terms of surface temperatures mostly, whereas the Gigabyte Aero on the bottom gets quite hot. Even if you're just doing something like Photoshop, it's hotter than I would like against my legs. It won't burn you, but it's not comfortable. If you're doing the same kind of Photoshop editing work with the MSI, it's not going to get uncomfortably hot. Top surface temperatures are the same. The Gigabyte is going to get hotter up top as well. So case temperatures, MSI wins. In terms of CPU and GPU temperatures, it's the usual story. The NVIDIA GPU usually is around 75 centigrade when you're gaming, which is fine, it's great. And the CPUs typically hit around 90 to 92, and then they're going to throttle back on both of these. The manufacturers have said pretty much to throttle there. 100 degrees is a maximum allowable. I would rather have it stay around 90 myself for the longevity of the machine. I'm not seeing a whole lot of difference in the core temperatures between these two machines. Displays, almost identical. Both of these are 144 hertz fast refresh IPS displays. 15.6-inch, 1920 by 1080 Full HD. The Aero has a 4K option. The MSI does not. I have not seen the latest generation Aero 4K display, so I can't tell you how great it looks, but it's supposed to be wide gamut, and that's nice. The Gigabyte Aero goes with a Pantone calibrated display, and the calibration is pretty good out of the box. I like it a little bit better than MSI. They have a variety of calibrations. Their sRGB is typically the best, but these panel numbers they're both made by AU Optronics, and you're just talking very similar panel numbers, very similar quality here. Really, it's pretty much a wash. In terms of keyboards and trackpad on these, you know, the Gigabyte grew on me. I like the feel of it. It's a little bit more like a mechanical keyboard, a very crisp, very nice tactile feel to it. It has a number pad, whereas the MSI doesn't. If you like a number pad, if you need a number pad, then that's a selling point. However, if you don't like or need one, then the drawbacks of that are the offset trackpad and more cramped keys. So I leave this one up to you. In terms of tactile feel, I like the Gigabyte a little better, but the MSI is also pretty nice with the SteelSeries keyboard, and they're both RGB per key backlit keyboards. The trackpads on these, well, like I said in my MSI review, finally an MSI trackpad that doesn't suck. It's pretty darn good. It's fairly enjoyable. It behaves well. I haven't accidentally thrown folders into places where they didn't belong, so that's a starting point that's pretty low, I know, but it's pretty good. The Gigabyte Aeros, it took more tweaking. It's an Elan trackpad. I didn't bother installing MS Precision trackpad drivers. You can do that if you want. But I tweaked settings, and pretty much I got rid of pinch zooming to make the multi-finger scrolling work. Anyway, I've got it where I like it, and I'm actually fine with it now, but it takes more twiddling. So I give the initial thumbs up to the MSI on that one for out of the box, kind of working better without having to futz around. While we're talking about having to futz around, this is the story with Gigabyte laptops. It seems it's not just this generation Aero 15X. If you look at forums, you'll see going back that they're a little bit more in need of maintenance, care, feeding, maybe a clean install of Windows and installing the drivers in the right order. Their Smart Update and their Smart Manager, which is their version of Dragon Center on the MSI for managing settings on the laptop, should be installed after you install all the drivers. Anyway, I've seen more quacky behavior from the Gigabyte. I have to say, part of it's NVIDIA's latest graphics drivers are just not playing really well with it, and it results in some blue screen of death when you're resuming from sleep, that sort of thing. But overall, yeah, they need to do a little bit more tweaking there for compatibility. Maybe it comes down to the fact that Gigabyte is still more of a motherboard manufacturer than anything else. So they're not as used to having to deal with entire system stability and slick-looking management centers for the computer and all that sort of thing. The MSI GS65 pretty much just works out of the box. They generally are fairly stable and fairly bulletproof. The only thing I can ding them on is they don't have the usual updater that you'll see on non-gaming PCs that tell you when drivers are ready, so you have to go looking for them. Whatever. With Wi-Fi on the MSI GS65, unless you get the Best Buy model, you're going to get a killer 1550 networking card, which is a very good card and very fast. It's the latest generation from Killer. The Best Buy model has the Intel 9260 AC card, which is Intel's latest generation. It's a pretty good card, too. For some reason, Gigabyte went with the last generation Intel 8265 AC card. It still works. It's okay. It's a passable card. It's just a little bit less impressive. It's kind of an odd decision on their point, honestly. Lastly, there's ports. And both of these have an ample selection of ports. Many USB 3.0 ports, HDMI 2.0, DisplayPort 1.4 on these. So you're not going to be hurting for connectivity, and both have Thunderbolt 3, full 4-lane PCIe. The one thing that the Gigabyte does nicely, and for those of you who are buying this for content creation, is it does have a fast SD card slot, one of the fastest on the market, whereas the MSI has none, which I think is an oversight for something that's obviously going to be a crossover for those of you who are moving on from a MacBook Pro or a Dell XPS 15 and you want more horsepower for gaming on the side too, and that sort of thing. One last important thing, people who buy gaming laptops, and some of you may just be from the productivity set, the Pro App set, and won't be thinking about this, but gaming laptop people tend to like to take their laptops apart to upgrade them. After all, you do have 2 RAM slots, you have 2 SSD slots. It's tempting, isn't it? With the Gigabyte, it's pretty easy. You unscrew the screws on the bottom, they're Torx T6, and there it is. The world is your oyster. If you want to repaste it, in fact, the heat sink and everything, right there, you can remove it. MSI with the Stealth line, including the older Stealth Pro and now the Stealth Thin, has an upside-down motherboard. That means that all of the components are facing away from you, so you have to take the motherboard out, disconnect a bunch of delicate ribbon cables. It's more of a pain in the neck. It's not so much for the faint of heart, likewise, if you want to repaste it. So you'll say, great, I have an extra M2 slot to put an SSD in. Oh, not so great. I have to do all this disassembly first, so gotta ding them for that. So how does the Asus ROG Zephyrus GM501 fit in, the one with the more normal design? It's pretty promising too, but to me, and I'll be reviewing this, it's a little bit more old-fashioned, or last year still. It has bigger bezels. It weighs the most. It's significantly heavier, particularly compared to the MSI GS65. And the battery life on it, not so good, because it has a much smaller capacity battery. But we'll cover that in a full review. The Razer Blade 15, also going to be reviewing that very soon. Obviously, it's going to be the prettiest, the most chic. It looks like a black MacBook. In terms of the thermals and the performance, we'll get into that soon, but it's going to be a couple of $100 more expensive than these. So you're paying for the nicer, higher quality materials that are used to build and casing. And we'll also be bringing in a couple of reseller brand machines too. You know, the folks at Cuck USA, which is Computer Upgrade King, other manufacturers or resellers, they have their own house brand too, and often you can save a lot of money and get almost the same specs. We're going to look at some of those too. Well, so there you have it, and this really is, honest to God, a toss-up. A lot of ways I'd say MSI GS65 Stealth Thin. It looks pretty good. It has a spacious keyboard for those of you who don't want the number pad. It's a very nice display. Cooling is a bit better on it. You get a faster Wi-Fi card. Those things all speak in favor of it. The one thing that really hurts the MSI is the fact that the motherboard is upside down. So doing any sort of repairs and upgrades is more of a hardship on it. It gets slightly shorter battery life too, by about an hour. And the build quality in terms of the amount of flex, for those of you who are worried about that, well, it does have some flex. The Gigabyte fights back with having a very rigid chassis, with having a more sophisticated build and design. You can access the internals easily, but it does lose on stability, and it has a more cramped keyboard because of that number pad. For those of you who want the number pad, that's awesome. If you don't, you probably won't like that so much. So there you have it. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.